welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. I hate making top 10 videos, so I made a whole bunch of them. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, hear me out. It has been more than 3 years since the last time I made my top 10 fantasy series of all time video, and I was thinking, it probably needs some updating. And I was also thinking, since I really don't enjoy the anxiety of making these videos, how can I make this a more meaningful experience? And I thought to myself, we could add a little bit of nuance to this whole top 10 format here on BookTube. So I decided to take things apart a little bit and look at, well, what is it about these authors that I like? So I made a series of 7 top 10 videos where I was looking at the authors who make me think, the authors who make me cry, the authors who make me laugh, the authors who have, in my opinion, the best prose, who have the best action, who have the best world building, and the authors who are the best at producing the surreal. So I made those 7 videos. And they had a pretty good reception. And I actually kind of found myself enjoying the process of taking apart, well, what is it about these different authors that I like? Because there are some that I really love for their creation of the surreal, the weird. And then there are others that I love the world building. So it was just fun to sort of tease that apart and decide, well, who are my top 10 in this category? Who are my top 10 in that category? And then I got a really great comment. I got a ton of great comments on those videos, actually. But one of the comments was from a viewer who suggested, well, why don't you compile all these and figure out who your real top 10 are? And I thought, well, that's scary and also probably a really good idea. So keeping things as honest as possible. Now, I'm not deceiving myself that this is somehow some scientific or objective process here. Obviously, this is all based on my opinions in each of these separate categories. And that is to say also, by the way, that just because your favorite is not on my list doesn't mean that I don't like that author. The fact of the matter is there's just so many great authors in this genre, in fantasy. And it's wonderful that different people have different tastes. So it was excruciating for me to realize that certain authors that I love aren't going to make this list. And then there are a couple of real surprises for me among the top 10 as well. So this was an interesting process for me to actually figure out. Now, what I did was, if an author in one of those 7 videos got let's say, within the top 10, if an author placed 10th in a certain category, let's say 10th in authors who make me laugh, then that author would get 1 point for placing 10th place. The author who placed in 9th would get 2 points. And the author in 8th place would get 3 points, etc., until you get to the author who's in first place in an individual category, and that would win that author 10 points. So a first place author in one of the 7 categories gets 10 points. So I added up all the points for all the different authors. Some of the authors did place in multiple categories and figured out who has the most points among these 7 videos that I made. And that is how I have determined my top 10 fantasy authors of all time, at the moment, at least. Because I could read tomorrow a great book by somebody and think, wow, that person should be in my top 10. So I reserve the right to change my mind, and that is a great thing as well. The reason this channel exists is really because I'm on this quest to find the best of fantasy, so I hope that this list will change in the future. So probably enough said there. Let me go over some of the authors who didn't quite make it. There were a lot of authors, and I was sad for them not to be in the top 10, but among them was Josiah Bancroft, R. Scott Baker, N.K. Jemisin, who had been in my list previously, didn't quite make the cut. Patrick Rothfuss, also Daniel Abraham, Fonda Lee. Just one of my favorite series I read last year was her Greenbone saga. Didn't quite make it. Jim Butcher, Scott Lynch, Guy Gavriel Kay. I need to read more Guy Gavriel Kay. That's really probably the reason why he's not appearing in the top 10 here. I'm going to be, in the future on the channel, covering a lot more GGK. But Brandon Sanderson, he's one of the behemoths of the genre for sure. Didn't quite make my list. Tad Williams, an author that I have read, really enjoyed, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Need to reread it. It's been a long time, and I probably should read more Williams as well, but didn't quite make the list this time. Robert Jordan, another great author in this genre. Terry Pratchett, only read 4 Discworld books, so I need to read more. I have a feeling the more Pratchett I read, the more I'm going to love that author, Sir Terry. Stephen King. I love the Dark Tower series. It was in my last favorite top 10 series of all time. King didn't quite make the cut here. Almost, but not quite. Susanna Clarke, another one that I deeply admire. Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman didn't quite make the list for me. And was a bit of a shock, honestly, because I do really love Neil Gaiman's writing, but not quite there. So who did make it? Well, let's start. Now, I have to mention as well, I had several ties. So it just happened to be the case that there are 4 ties. And because there are 4 ties, I'm actually going to have to put 11 authors forward. So my top 10 is really my top 11 here because of the 4 ties. There was no way for me not to have 11. I couldn't exclude one of the authors who tied for 10th place, in other words. And I'm happy to include 11 because it was really hard to see some of the authors who didn't quite make the list. But let's get on with it. So, in a tie for 10th place, one of the authors is John Gwyn, author of The Faithful and the Fallen, also the follow-up series of Blood and Bone, and my favorite, the Bloodsworn Saga, which is going to be complete this year, 2024. I'm really excited for that. John Gwyn just made it here because of his ability to make me cry. It was one of the categories he placed very well in. And another one where he actually took first place was in authors who write excellent action for me. I love John Gwyn's action scenes. He has a great sense of battle. He knows, because he is a Viking reenactor, and he knows about, Burnies and swords and battle axes and all that stuff. He knows what he's talking about when he writes battles, and he's so good at giving us the zoom view as well as the, let's say, pan out a little bit here and look at this big picture of the battle. So just a great fun author. I find his characters somehow become so dear to me. And as I said, he has this ability to make me cry. I mean, he is not afraid to kill off characters. So be warned if you haven't tried John Gwyn yet. And another author who's not afraid to kill off characters is George R. R. Martin, who tied with John Gwyn in 10th place. Each of them, by the way, accumulating 18 points in total. Now, in Martin's case, he made the cut because of his ability to make me laugh, because of his awesome action, and because of his amazing world building. These are all categories that he placed in, and his highest being action and world building. A Song of Ice and Fire is vast. It is one of the great achievements of the genre, in my opinion. There's just so much I can say in praise of George R. R. Martin, but he is, without even having finished A Song of Ice and Fire, probably one of the most influential fantasy authors of the 21st century. And that is saying a lot, because he writes stories that are compelling. He writes stories that keep us on the edge of our seat, and also stories that allow us to get lost in this vast world of his. So I just love his work. This is a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, by the way. The Dunk and Egg stories, of course, that's set in the same world as A Song of Ice and Fire, just a little bit earlier, but just wonderful stuff. I'm a huge fan. And I have to say that Martin, whether that series ever is finished or not, A Song of Ice and Fire, I am very glad to have read the 5 books that he has produced. I will never regret that. So another tie here, and we're going to call it 8th place, and it's one of the greatest authors I have encountered recently. I'm so happy to have discovered this author and to be reading this author's work, and I'm just probably, because I'm in the middle of her tremendous series, her 11-book series, there's a good chance that this author could even climb higher, but Jenny Wirtz makes the cut this time for her amazing ability to make me think. Very thought-provoking work here. Also, her gorgeous prose. Her prose is very distinct. If you have not read a Jenny Wirtz book yet, it is difficult for me to convey the degree to which her prose stands out among the great authors of the genre. Very distinct. She sends me to my dictionary quite frequently, and I love that about her. I love how she challenges me with the thoughts-provoking nature of her work, also the prose, and she's great for action. There are some gut-wrenching action scenes in this series as well. She does it all. And also her world building, it is vast. It is tremendous. This series is really something, let me tell you. And every book I read, I think, wow, this is getting bigger and bigger. And I am amazed at what I am encountering in the Wars of Light and Shadow. Her masterpiece, now finished as of May of 2024. The final book is coming out. And I'm only 5 books into it, but wow. And I've also read a standalone of hers, To Ride Hell's Chasm, which I also deeply admire for the same reasons. Just beautiful theme work, amazing prose, gut-wrenching action, all of the above. So tied with Jenny Wirtz in 8th place, both of them having 19 points. See how close this is to Gwyn and Martin. But Wirtz and Abercrombie just edged those two with 19 points. And we have Joe Abercrombie here. This is an author who is for a long time been a favorite of mine. I have read everything First Law, love his work. I am a huge admirer of especially The Age of Madness, which I think, in my personal opinion, is Abercrombie's very best. So I'm excited to see what he comes out with next. But I love everything First Law. Those characters in the original trilogy are absolutely dear to me. But I think he's done some really compelling theme work and some amazing action and some really fantastic, strong female characters as well in Age of Madness. But oh my goodness, what is it about Abercrombie that I love? Well, it's his ability to make me laugh. He is my #1 author in fantasy for his ability to make me laugh. And it is that humor that makes this bleak, grimdark world tolerable. Otherwise, oh my goodness, this would be so depressing. But Abercrombie, I'm having a great time while I'm reading about these very flawed, kind of pathetic, just deeply disturbed characters. It's amazing, his ability to endear these characters to me in the process as well. Also for his action, he was close to the top as well in the category of action, in 2nd place there. So he had a 1st place and a 2nd place, accumulating 19 points in the process, and just great action. Battle scenes, amazing. I love how he will go from do the head hopping in the midst of the battle, and you might be in the perspective of just some poor grunt who's about to get diced into pieces or blown to bits, and then it changes perspective, and it's really just relentless in its pacing when he gets into those scenes, and just beautifully done. So Joe Abercrombie makes the cut for me. Next on my list, this is actually probably the biggest surprise for me, that this author even made my top 10. If I had just sat down and thought about, oh, here are my top 10 authors, I probably would have considered this author, but I don't think this author would have made my top 10 actually. But now I'm being made honest by this process of coming up with these videos. Well, here's where I think this author is really brilliant, where this author is one of the very best. And this particular author really did place high in a couple key categories. Those being authors who make me think, authors with just tremendous prose, and authors who create the surreal. And that author is Gene Wolfe. I have read his book of The New Sun, and I can't say that I would not use the word enjoy. I did not enjoy myself, at least emotionally, while I was reading Book of the New Sun. But I cannot deny the brilliance of Gene Wolfe. And the fact of the matter is, I could say I enjoyed Book of the New Sun in the sense that I found it intellectually challenging. And I like that. And Gene Wolfe definitely did challenge me. And I also think that I'm going to actually enjoy the book more on a second read, which I definitely will do because it deserves it. There's just so much there I know that I haven't quite grasped by reading it only once. But Gene Wolfe, I mean, the guy's undoubtedly was a genius, and his ability to provoke thought is among the greatest. Also, his prose is just tremendous, and there's some surreal stuff in there, that is for sure. In fact, he placed 2nd in my list of authors who create the weird. And if you ever read Book of the New Sun, I think you probably would place him pretty high on that one as well. But yeah, this was the surprise to me because I would probably not have placed Gene Wolfe in my top 10, but I think it's fair that he's there on the basis of those criteria. Tying with Gene Wolfe, this is a tie again for sixth place. Each of these authors, Gene Wolfe and the one I'm about to tell you about, both accumulated 22 points out of the 7 categories. And this particular author who tied with Gene Wolfe, this one's not a surprise to me. This is a favorite, one of my very favorite authors of all time. I knew this one going in. And just one that I grew up with and that is part of my DNA. And that is Ursula K Leuin, author of the Earthsea books. And I just love Le Guin's prose. I love her world. And those are 2 of the reasons. Also, she makes me cry sometimes. And she made that category. And she definitely makes me think. That is one of the great things about Ursula K Leuin. That is a category in which she placed second. An author who makes me think. Did very well in those other categories as well. But I just love these Earthsea books. They're like coming home for me. Such a beautiful world, and the poeticness of her writing is just it's just gorgeous. I love Ursula K Leuin's ability to write characters that stay with me, that I think about long after I put the book down. Just one of the pillars of the genre, and I'm so glad that she made my top 10 as a result of accumulating all these points in these different categories. An author who I believe deserves more recognition, who has made my top 10, and in placing in 5th place, in fact, is C Eselmont, one of the 2 authors behind the Malazan series. And Eselmont is the author specifically of the novels of the Malazan Empire, of which this is the first, Knight of Knives, and also of the Path to Ascendancy series. So far he has published 10 books in the Malazan world. I've read every one of them and love these books. The world that Eselmont and Erikson created is one of the most vast, intricate, diverse, and compelling I have ever come across. And that's just the beginning of the genius of the Malazan series. Another thing that, besides world building, that Eselmont is just brilliant at is his ability to make me laugh. There is also a shared Malazan humor, something I think that the 2 authors probably developed together as they were gaming the world and creating this tremendous world together. A lot of the greatest characters in the Malazan series, the various Malazan series, are actually duos. There are a lot of pairings, and that probably reflects the relationship between Eselmont and Erikson that they developed while they were gaming the world. Eselmont makes me laugh. He also does action brilliantly. Some of the greatest battles you ever come across are Malazan battles, and that includes Eselmont. One of the greatest naval battles I've ever encountered is in Stonewielder, one of the novels of the Malazan Empire. There's a lot of ships on his book covers, so he does a lot of naval stuff, but just brilliant stuff. So for his ability also to create the surreal, and I think in this particular category, Eselmont outdoes Steven Erikson by a hair, in my opinion. He's some eerie stuff. And Blood and Bone is a book where, oh man, that is haunting stuff. Eselmont does that really well. There's a horror element that is present in a lot of his books too. That's really does create that sense of the surreal. So I'm very happy that Eselmont made the list. Next is going to be another tie for 3rd place, which I'm really pleased about, to tell you the truth. These 2 authors, I knew they would make the cut, but I like that they tied with each other. That makes me happy. And one of them is Robin Hobb, author of The Realm of the Elderlings. I just at the very beginning of this year, really end of last year, beginning of this year, finished reading Realm of the Elderlings. Already knew that Robin Hobb was a top author for me. Her ability to make me cry is without peer. I don't think any author has made me shed as many tears as Robin Hobb. And that is one of the categories that actually she placed first in that category. Other categories where she placed high, she actually is an author who makes me think as well. And she's brilliant. Some of her themes that she weaves into Realm of the Elderlings, just great stuff. I mean, there's othering, there's our connection to the world around us in such a deep spiritual sense. She achieves that through her magic systems. and just creates these wonderful, compelling characters with these beautiful relationships that just feel so full, so resonant, that these characters are just always echoing within me. I love how she has made me love her characters and the world that they inhabit. And world building is another one where she placed, as well as prose. Robin Hobb's prose is kind of understated in a way, because it's not prose that calls attention to itself, but it's really very good. It's very good prose. So all those categories are reasons why Robin Hobb, having accumulated 27 points, is in third place, but she shares that spot with another author who accumulated 27 points for slightly different reasons. But I'm very pleased that this author is here, because this author, for the longest part of my life, was my favorite author of all time. This is the author who brought me into fantasy, the author who baptized my imagination, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings, among other things, in Middle-earth. So some of the reasons why Tolkien makes third place with 27 points is his ability to make me cry. There are certain moments that always get me. I don't know how many times I've read Lord of the Rings specifically, but it gets me every time. There are certain moments involving a certain wizard, particularly. I don't know if it's possible to spoil. I won't spoil anything, but there are certain moments that really do still grab me, no matter how many times I've read this book. Also, Tolkien makes me laugh. I love that he makes me laugh. And there are just such endearing moments, especially with the hobbits. These hobbits, they're us in Middle-earth. The hobbits we are inhabiting that world through the hobbits in this mythical, just vast, larger-than-life setting with these legendary characters like Aragorn and Gandalf and Legolas and all the others. And we're these little hobbits in there. And it's good to have a laugh sometimes when you're in the midst of an epic world like that. So I just love that Tolkien does that for me. I love his prose. I adore his prose. I am myself a medievalist, and I love that Tolkien goes for the archaic. At times, he's really got a range when he has the more humorous moments with the hobbits and so on. There's a certain tone there, but he also can change it up and make it high and serious. And often when he's doing that, he will slip in some archaic words. But I just love his prose and his world building. World building, for me, Tolkien is number one. And that is one of the reasons why he makes number 3 overall. His world building is, who else has invented languages, several languages for their world like that? Some other authors have languages. They have depended on linguists to develop those languages for them, I think. So even authors like George R. R. Martin, there are a couple languages, I think, associated with A Song of Ice and Fire, but I think he had some help from some linguists. Tolkien did it all on his own. He spent years and years and years developing the mythology, the history, the languages, the backdrop, the mythical backdrop. He created an entire mythological system here for this world, and then he wrote stories to make that world come alive. And I am so glad he did. And Tolkien will always be one of my favorites of all time. But now I'm down to numbers 2 and 1. And this was a little bit of a surprise. Not a big surprise in the sense that this author has always made my list ever since I started making these lists in 2020. Made the list in 2021. But this is an author that has recently deeply impressed me with his latest trilogy. I read now 3 complete trilogies by this author, and each one brings a little something different to the table. But I always find that no matter the trilogy, no matter the book by this author that I'm reading, it just almost reads itself. I love this author's ability to simultaneously challenge me, make me think, but also just sweep me up in the story. And that is a skill. That is something you don't often see. There are authors who do make me think, and they tend to be slow reads. And then there are authors who I love turning the page and it's action. It's very rare to see an author who can combine those two things. And the author who does that for me is Mark Lawrence. And as I said, I've read 3 complete trilogies. I'm in the midst of the library trilogy. In fact, I'm reading book 2 of the library trilogy right now. It just came out, the book that broke the world. The book that wouldn't burn was my favorite book of 2023. And it is because of this recent series, I think, especially, that Mark Lawrence has become #2 on my list. But, his ability to, he's got it all. Along with Robin Hobb, Mark Lawrence has placed in, I think it was 5 of these 7 categories. So the only author who would place in more is the #1. We'll get to that. But Mark Lawrence and Robin Hobb placed in 5 of the 7, and he does so much. He makes me think. He makes me cry. He makes me laugh. And he's got the action. And he creates the surreal. He's among the very best when it comes to that. And it's interesting because each of the trilogies, I think, does highlight some of those abilities of Mark Lawrence. For example, the first trilogy, the Broken Empire trilogy, that's grimdark. That is really atmospheric, dark stuff. But the next trilogy is the one that makes me laugh like anything. Mark Lawrence has a brilliant sense of humor. So it's not all grimdark. In fact, only his first trilogy is grimdark. It's the Red Queen's War that makes me laugh so much, and it's set in the same world as the Broken Empire. You have a different narrator / protagonist there, and this guy is hilarious, but also thought-provoking because he's an unreliable narrator as well. Just brilliant stuff. Crying, read the Book of the Ancestor. That's just a beautiful trilogy featuring one of my favorite fantasy protagonists of all time, Nona. There are several moments that just got me big time in that trilogy, particularly towards the end. But it's the Library trilogy where I'm just completely blown away by Mark Lawrence's ability to challenge me and make me think. The themes that he's woven into the Library trilogy, it's all about knowledge and how we know what we know, the unreliability of history, the privileged narrative, let's say. He's got some wonderful characters in there as well, some compelling arcs going on here. It's just got so much going for it in a world that is just crazy weird and so compelling. There is an infinite library in this. What book lover wouldn't be intrigued by that? So there's just a lot of really cool stuff going on and very timely themes as well. A lot of really cool stuff going on in Mark Lawrence's brain, and somehow he gets it out into these books, and I couldn't be happier. So who's #1 for me? Well, if you are a follower of this channel, you're not going to be super shocked by the author who placed #1, who actually, in all 7 of those videos, took one of the top 10 spots, and that is Steven Erikson, author of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, among other series set in the Malazan world, including this beauty right here, the Witness Trilogy. This is the God Is Not Willing, the first book of the Witness Trilogy. My nice little hardcover version, signed with a nice little note from Steven Erikson in here, and bought for me by my nemesis, AP Canavan, over at A Critical Dragon. It's a pretty funny note in here, actually, to Philip. Thanks for the great YouTube discussions, but AP is the original Dr. Fantasy, he wishes. He made me write that. That's Steven Erikson saying he made me write that. You're Steven Erikson. Yeah, Steven Erikson is my favorite author, and it is because of his ability to make me think. That is a category where he placed first for me. Very thought-provoking stuff. There's some deeply beautiful philosophical moments in his writing that I just resonate with. Thoughts about life and death and grief and love, thoughts about beauty, thoughts about sorrow, you name it. The Malazan Book of the Fallen has it. Also, his ability to make me cry. There are just so many moments. In The Crippled God, the last quarter of the book, I'm a complete mess. And there are several books in the series. And this book too, by the way. There are just his ability to create compelling character moments. Just beautiful stuff. And it's not always with sorrow that I'm crying. Sometimes, often actually, probably even more often, I'm crying out of joy, out of happiness because of the reunion, let's say, of 2 characters. Erikson is brilliant at that. And it's such a long series as well that you might have characters who see each other after many, many books, and it's always beautiful. And his ability to make me rethink a character as well in the midst of the series where I thought I knew who that was, and nope, actually, Here's another facet of that character. Here's another perspective on that character. Makes you a little hesitant to judge people when you realize that a change of perspective can alter your thinking on that individual. He also makes me laugh. As I said before, Malazan humor is just fantastic, particularly when I'm among the Malazan soldiers. Just wonderful stuff. His prose, oh my goodness, he's my favorite in terms of prose as well. His range is tremendous. He can be Shakespearean at times, and also can give you some real crude soldier humor. The same guy does all of it. His range is just tremendous. He can write like so many different writers, and I love that ability. And he's good at all of them. The action, oh my goodness, the action that Steven Erikson writes is out of this world. It is just crazy. Any Malazan fan can list off a sequence of tremendous battles, and each of them is distinct. You have Kapistan, for example, which is one of the grimmest occurrences you'll ever come across in literature. You'll have this awe-inspiring, crazy infernos like in Igatan. You just have so many different kinds of action going on. Sometimes it's intimate. Erikson is brilliant. I mean, there's a fencing scene in Gardens of the Moon that is just perfect because Erikson himself was a fencer and knows what he's talking about when he's writing about sword fights and stuff. So he does intimate action really well as the big scale stuff. He does it all. And he also has, along with C Eselmont, one of the most crazy, vast, incredible worlds you will ever see in fantasy. It is so diverse and so incredible and so beautiful and so stark and everything. It's just all there. You have forests and mountains and oceans and you name it, with some crazy magic. I mean, the Warrens, I don't think anyone, including maybe Erikson and Eselmont, completely understands the Warrens, let alone the characters in the book. And that's just a huge part of the world as well. And you just got so much great stuff. And the surreal, he creates some truly weird, bizarre moments as well that will have you thinking for a long time. So yes, Steven Erikson, my favorite author of all time, is my number one here in this video. Big surprise, but there it is. So yeah, these are my favorites. And as I said in the beginning, I think that there's plenty of room for lots of different lists here. I would love to hear about your favorite authors in the fantasy genre as well and why you love them. I hope to discover many more. As I said, this is a process for me. This is a quest, an ongoing journey of discovering great writers. And I love sharing my enthusiasm for the writers that I've found that have resonated with me. And I love hearing people praise their favorites as well. So please do leave a comment letting me know what you think. And that is it from me for now. Until next time.